Interfaith Pilgrimage of the Middle Passage was a great experiment, and it was envisioned by a white woman who was a Buddhist nun and my spiritual teacher. And she wrote to me from Sri Lanka, and she was on a peace mission in Sri Lanka. And she got this message that she needs to be doing that particular work that she does in her own war-torn country of the United States. And she needs to start, as a white person, addressing racism. And so she wrote to me from Sri Lanka and said that she had a proposition for me, and that she would be flying back to the States that following week, and could we meet? And she came to my home, and we sat for about 15 hours in my apartment in Amherst and looked at the possibility of making a journey to examine racism by going to the root of it. Wow. I didn't know what to say, because she asked me to head up the project. I had never been on a pilgrimage before. I had been on small walks with her, but she was like, let's envision this. What if we got a group of people of African descent and people of European descent walking the combined history together, and we go back to the African continent? And so I said, talk more. And so she says, well, we would start off in Africa, and we would do the Middle Passage journey back to the US. And so I said, you almost had me, Sister Claire, but for me, I don't know anyone of African descent who was not born on that continent that would want to go there to leave it again. I think the journey has to be in reverse. And it will be like a homegoing, and we will look at the history together. And so in 1998, we embarked on that journey after 6 years of organizing. And we got a group of the descendants of the people that enslaved Africans and the descendants of the Africans that were stolen from the continent. And we made that journey, and it was 13 months. It was quite arduous, as you all can imagine, but I cannot imagine not having done it, because it has informed the way that I do my work today as an activist, as a cultural activist. And I knew on the journey that we were going to be learning from the communities that we walked through. We walked 20 miles a day down the eastern seaboard of the United States to 4 Caribbean islands, Brazil, and West Africa, and ending in South Africa. And we decided we wanted to end in South Africa because even though their history of slavery was not a part of the transatlantic slave trade, it was part of the East Indian slave trade. But at that time, at that period of time, we wanted to end in a place of hope on the African continent. And for us, at that time, South Africa was that beacon. That was the beacon of hope. And Nelson Mandela was just finishing up his 5 years of being the first Black president of the Republic of South Africa. So we wanted to be there for the changing of the guard when he would pass the baton on to Thabo Mbeki. And so we were fortunate enough and blessed enough to get Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to be the chair of our advisory board. And that was thrilling. He really came through for us and opened a lot of doors, especially on the continent. But we walked 20 miles a day down the eastern seaboard, and this pilgrimage was not funded. People came on their own steam, and that was a great part of the experiment, because we said, if we do this honest work, really looking at ways together on how to dismantle racism by going to communities, people are going to latch onto that idea, and they're going to help us. And we stayed in communities where people fed us. They gave us places to sleep. We had fellowship with communities, and we talked about what slavery was like in those particular areas that we went to, those cities and towns that we went to. But we also talked about the current slavery and violence that was happening to people in those places. And so it was a great, fellowship, and we had people walking with us. We started out with 50 people. We had people that came. We had monks come from Japan. We had Japanese devotees of the order of Nippon Hoji. We had a mother and daughter from Chile. We had a gentleman from Peru. So people caught on to this idea when the word was out that there was going to be this great undertaking that had never been done before, this great experiment. Everybody wanted to join us, and I think that's how you get the work done. I love working in the grassroots, because it's always the grassroots that affect change, right? And that's the work that we're all doing. We work with the grassroots, and with the people on the ground, the people that are suffering, the oppressed. And it was an amazing journey. And so as we're going along, I knew that I was learning so much about the system of slavery and how that worked, that I knew that I was not going to, at the end, I was not going to come back to the United States to live, that I needed to know more, especially when I got to places like Haiti and Cuba. And when I got on the African continent, I definitely knew that I was not going to return to the US, but I wasn't sure where I was going to be, So when I was in Senegal, I was in love with Senegal. I'm going to come back to Senegal. When I got to Cote d'Ivoire, I loved Cote d'Ivoire. Ghana was amazing. Yes, I would love to come back and live in Ghana. And then I got to Benin, and Benin called on me, and we went to a place called Ouida. And the interesting part of Ouida was I had never heard of Ouida before, but I knew that we were going to go to Benin, but I thought we'd just go to the capital city of Cotonou. But I found out from a professor in New Orleans. He worked at Southern University. He called me up when the pilgrimage was in North Carolina. He got my number and said that he had heard an interview with me and Sister Claire talking about the pilgrimage on NPR. And he had just gotten back from Ouida. He was interviewing a voodoo priest there. And he said, when you and Sister Claire told the story of how Claire got this vision or this message in 1992, that she needs to be making this pilgrimage, looking at racism and going to Africa. He said, I just interviewed this priest, a voodoo priest. He was like the supreme patriarch of voodoo in Ouida. This man in 1992 began making a prayer on the beach every single day for the children of the stolen ones to come home. And he said, so don't you get it? Claire received his message, because I was like, well, I'm not sure we're going to go to Ouida. He said, no, you have to go to Ouida. I said, well, I don't know if we have contacts there. He said, you do have contacts. And do you have a pencil and paper? Because there is a woman there. She's the director of the African Museum, and she's waiting for your call. to receive you. And so we went to Ouida, and Ouida changed my life. And so I was going to go back to Ouida to live. But when I got to South Africa and got to Cape Town, I knew I was home. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was Table Mountain and the energy that came from the mountain, but I knew I needed to be at that place. And I think I needed to be there and plant some roots there. Not that that was where my ancestry was it's from, or my heritage, but the history of apartheid and the history of Jim Crow are so parallel. Our histories are so parallel. And the whole issue around racism. The architects of apartheid fashioned it after the American Jim Crow system. And I did not know that, but I learned that history when I got to Cape Town. And because it was a new dispensation and Black folks finally had their freedom, they were needing, and especially the young people, they were needing information from the outside world, because that country had been closed off for 50 years. People didn't even have televisions. Televisions were kind of outlawed in South Africa for a long time. I learned a lot. And so I spent time there before the pilgrimage arrived. I went ahead and I spent about 3 weeks in Cape Town, organizing, working with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who hosted us, and as well as St. George's Cathedral, which was Desmond Tutu's church. And everyone that I met, I met with ex-combatants and people that were, an integral part of the liberation struggle, all grassroots folks, telling me these stories and saying, you need to come back here. Why don't you come back and work with us and work with our kids? And because we want to learn from you. And I says, well, if I come back, I want to learn from you. So it's going to be an equal exchange. And 6 months later, I moved back. I moved to Cape Town. The pilgrimage ended. And I came home and sold all my things and gave stuff away. And I left. My daughter was with me on the pilgrimage. She turned 18 on the pilgrimage, and that it changed her life as well. And so I went back, and I went back for the Parliament of World Religions, because the pilgrimage was one of many organizations that was recognized as a gift of service to the world. And so we were invited to go back to the Parliament of World Religions. And so I went back with a small delegation from the pilgrimage to the Parliament, and then when that delegation left to go back to the States, I stayed, and I stayed 10 years, and that 10 years changed the trajectory of my life. I just began working at a grassroots level. I wasn't getting paid. I did some fundraising in the States, so I had enough money to live off of for a while. And I just started setting up projects where I thought it was needed, So I started working with a group of young people in the township, and they just and I helped them discover that they were amazing writers, and that they were showing them their brilliance. And so I started a writing group, and then they wanted to sing, and so we put together a chorus and we performed, and I would bring them into Cape Town, and they performed at the South African National Gallery. And these are kids who never left their township, had never gone downtown, and never explored their city. And I wanted to show them, hey, this is the new South Africa, and it's your country. You can do whatever you want now. You can go around. You won't be arrested if you walk down the street and walk into a building or into a museum. And so it was just sharing, a little bit about myself and helping them build their self-esteem. Then I was introduced to the refugee community because now South Africa was an open country. They were receiving refugees from Rwanda, Congo, Burundi, Somalia, and Angola. And so I started working with refugee children, doing the same kinds of things and looking at issues of xenophobia. And so wherever I saw something that wasn't right or something that shouldn't be and something that was hurtful to people, I would create a project around it, but always using the performing arts. And then getting connected with the arts community, with musicians and poets and writers, and creating bodies of work with them. And so I was just having a blast. I was having fun. It wasn't like really work for me, but it's, you know, it was my joy because it taught me who I am. It helped me to understand who I am as an African, not as an African American, but as an African, and what I lost, what was taken from me, and 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 finding out how to get that back through the work with these young people. And so, you know, and it was all about radical truth telling, you know, hearing their stories and making theater from their stories and from their truth, and letting them know that their stories matter, that everybody has a story, their stories matter, and people need to understand and know their stories. And so we did it through theater and music and dance, and I continued to do that work. I stayed there for 10 years. I worked with refugee women, um, um, helping them through women who were holding trauma. So I created a project called Woman Spirit, and helping them reconnect to their spirit, because when you're so traumatized by war and conflict, these are women who saw their families slaughtered right in front of them, you know. I mean, the most horrific things that a human being could do to another human being, these women witnessed and had done to them. And so I just created a sacred space for them to come to, and we did all these healing modalities, and you know, like Tai Chi, Indonesian finger holds, you know, anything that was going to help alleviate their pain, or to put them back into a calm place, or to get them recentered. Because when we're so traumatized, what do? We unplug. We unplug from our spirit. And so that's why I named it Woman Spirit, helping these women to plug back in to their spirit so that they could take care of their children and take care of themselves, you know. And so that was a great joy for me. And then I came back to the States in 2009, just for a short visit. And while I was here, I realized that I really didn't know my grandchildren. That every time I would come home, because I was there 9 months out of the year, and then I would come back here for 3. And when I would come back home, I had to get to know them all over again. They had to get to know me all over again. And I was like, you know, here I am around the world working with other people's children. I don't know my own grandchildren. So I decided to stay and love up on them for a while, and teach them and learn from them and have them teach me. And so that's been great. But now it's time for me to go back. But what I did was, from 2009 until now, I would go back once a year to Cape Town and do a major project with young people, or with artists. And but now it's time for me to return. So I'm going to go back in June and look for a place and resettle there. I told my girls, my granddaughters, you're old enough, you know me now. You're going to be off to college soon, and you'll be on your own. You can jump on a plane and come and see me. Um, so that's the plan. Um, I can't imagine not being an activist and not trying and not helping to make change um, in the world and in people's lives. And I'm really proud at what I do, at the work that I've done and the work that I'm going to continue doing, and until I take my last breath. I just turned 75 3 weeks ago, and I feel great. I still have good energy, and I'm just going to keep doing what I do because it has to be done. You know, the world depends on us.